Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Programming in Access 2013. My name is Steve Bishop. Today we're going to be doing another video on a login screen, but unlike my first video, we're not going to be using a combo box. Because if you recall, in that other video, we stored our usernames and password in a combo box, and then compared what the user typed in for the password to what was stored in the combo box. But in this particular case, we're going to do a much more traditional login screen, where the user needs to type in both the username and the password in order to gain entry into the database. All right, we're also going to do a little bit of validation here too, so let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to go into my database here, and I've got, of course, my Table 1 Employees table that has a password and username. I've renamed the old login form. I've added the old in parentheses when I renamed it. And that just is a good idea to hold on and keep your old forms around just in case there may be some code in there that you want to copy or retrieve, or maybe the user or customers have said, well, you know, I kind of like the way that old form used to look. Can you go back to that old form? Well, it's nice to go ahead and keep that information around so that you can easily get back into it and recreate it. So that's just a good idea to go ahead and just rename it. You know, eventually, after so long that it's pretty clear that that form won't be used anymore, then go ahead and delete it at that time. All right, so we're going to go to the Create tab and then Form Design. We're going to create a new form here, and I'm going to resize it here. I'm going to make it pretty wide, actually. I'm going to make it nice and wide, and you'll see why in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and drop in a couple of text boxes. And let me go ahead and change the labels here. So this is going to be username. This is going to be password. And let's resize these so that they're the correct width here. Something a little bit more readable here, and a little bit more room for them to type in. And I'm going to move these a little bit more to the center of our form here, maybe a little bit more left. Now let's go ahead and drop a button in here, and the button is what the user is going to actually click on in order to try to log into the database. So they're going to type here, and then click on this button. So we're going to change this to the login button. Now, remember how I said we're going to add some validation? What I need to do is I'm going to drop in a couple of labels here. And the first one is going to be something that says incorrect username. And of course, we want to use this label whenever the user is going to type in an incorrect username, something we don't find in the database. Then I'm also going to add another label here, okay? And this label is going to do the same thing, but for the password. And because these are error messages, I'm going to go ahead and make the color red, and I'm going to make them nice and bold. I'm going to go ahead and resize these to make sure that they're completely visible. All of the text is visible. So that's pretty good. That's nice and visible error messages here for my validation. And let's go and make some changes now to the form, because if you notice, let me go ahead and open it the way it stands. Right now we've got a record selector here on the left. We've got navigation buttons on the bottom here. And really, the user is able to interact with all the stuff behind it. So we need to do some things to the properties of this form in order to really make this a login form. Okay, there's some things that we just really need to do to this sucker. First and foremost, of course, is get rid of those record selectors and navigation buttons. So record selectors, no. Navigation buttons, no. And those, of course, are under the Format tab. I'm going to change the caption, of course, to login screen, or whatever you want to call it here. Mine's going to be login screen. And let's see, what else do we want to do? Well, typically on a form that's a login screen, you don't want them to be able to do anything else with your database. So what we want to do is we're going to change this form to a pop-up screen, and we're also going to set the modal property to yes as well. And what a pop-up screen is something you probably already know. It's just going to basically pop this window, this form, out of the inline version of our Access. It's going to be a window that appears on top of all of the other windows. What modal does is that forces the user to interact with this form and with this form only. They cannot interact with any of the forms or tables or any part of Access behind it. So now when I click the view, you'll see that it pops up here as a window. And when I try to go click on something else behind it, notice that Access is kicking out a little Bing error telling me you can't do that, and I'm being forced to interact with these controls. The other thing I probably should do is get rid of these control boxes up here in the upper right. So let me go ahead and do that now. I'm going to go to under the Format tab. There is the control box. I'm going to set to no. I'm going to change the close button also to no. And you'll see, I just noticed this was a little off there. Okay, you'll see now that my control box up here in the upper right, okay, these minimize, restore, and close buttons, those buttons are gone. I don't have any way to click on these and shut down my window. Now I still do have the right click, and that's okay. Okay, that once we actually distribute this application, we're gonna basically eliminate this right click option. But for right now, we don't have the control box over here in the upper right hand corner. It's in a modal window, so they can't click out of it and do anything elsewhere. We're really locking them into this login window. There's one other thing, well actually there's a couple of other things I also want to address. Number one, this window is resizable, and you'll notice that when I resize it, I get these scrolls here, right? I get these scroll bars. And that is what is actually the cause of this gray bar down here at the bottom of my form, okay? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do a couple things. First, we're going to change the border style from sizable to dialog, okay? And then I'm also going to change the scroll bars from both to neither. And now the form is really going to shine, okay? I have no control buttons over here on the right. I cannot resize it. Notice my arrow doesn't turn into double arrows, so I can't resize the window. And that gray bar down at the bottom is completely gone. I really have a login screen here. You may have noticed that the red labels are showing up here, so we probably need to go ahead and change their visible property, huh? So let's go over here and change those. The visible property is set to yes right now, so let's change it to no, so that when the form first opens, we don't see those labels. All right, and now let's go through and rename them, because text 0 and text 2 and label 5, these don't really help us any. So let's go ahead and change their names. TXT username, oops, and TXT password. We're going to change this label to LBL wrong user. This one is going to be LBL wrong pass. And let's change the name of this button to button login. Okay, I'm also going to set this button to be the default button, so that if the user clicks on the enter key on his keyboard, it acts as if the user did the same thing as clicking on the button. Okay, that's what the default property on a button does, is it sets it to the default button that is assumed to have been clicked if the user hits the enter key on their keyboard while they're looking at this form. Okay, so that looks all good to me. Text, username, password, a login button, and just one quick little look again. Again, those labels are gone. We've got a login screen. Everything looks really good and ready to go here for the view of my login screen. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on some of the code. Now, when you think about this logically, essentially what we're doing is we're going to compare, first and foremost, the username that they type in to the username that is in the usernames, I should say, that are in our table here. So what we're going to want to do is first and foremost open up this table as a record set and then look for any record that matches the one that is found that they typed in here. Okay, if there is a record found, then we want to go to it. So if somebody types in S Bishop here in this text box, then we're going to want to move the record set cursor to that particular record in our record set that matches what the user typed in that text box. And then we're going to compare the password of that record set to whatever the user types into this password text box here. And if it all works out properly, then we go ahead and let them go into the database. Okay. Oh, and one other thing we probably want to do, now that I just realized, we probably want to go ahead and set the input mask of our password. We're going to change this to a password. Okay. And that's how you get that the asterisk view when you type text in here. I'll just show you real quick. You know how when you type in password, you see how we have asterisks instead of the actual letters? That's how you do that. You got to add that input mask. All right. Let's go ahead and save our form here, form login. I'm going to reopen it here. All right, so in my form here, when the user clicks on the login, I'm going to go to the onClick event, and I'm going to go into the code builder. First thing, of course, is as usual, option explicit needs to be typed up there in our declarations. And again, for those of you that don't know, option explicit basically forces you to use proper data types. It's strongly typed data types, okay? And what that does is it just helps eliminate the potential for mistyping out a variable name. Because if you do, if you mistype a variable name, it's entirely possible that Access will just actually create a new variable of whatever the mistake was that you typed in. So we don't really want that. We want to make sure that we're purposely declaring our variables. The first thing I want to do is I want to go grab the data that is in our table here, our table 1 employees, and put all of this into a record set. So I'm going to dim myself or RS as a record set. And in our past videos that we worked with record sets, we also dimmed DB as a database. Okay, and then we went set DB equal to current DB, and then set RS equal to db.openRecordSet. And then we passed in something like this, our table TBL 1 employees, and then we filled out some of the parameters here, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I'm just going to show you that this dim of a DB as database and then setting the database is not necessarily always required. And in this particular case, I can go ahead and delete that, and I'm just going to actually use the current database object to go and open my record set. So I don't even need to create an object of a type of database and then set its value to current DB. I can just go ahead and use current DB to do the open record set method on it to go grab my table from it. I don't need that extra database. Now sometimes you can run into conflicts. I have occasionally run into an issue, but in this particular case I know it already works, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And it just kind of shortens up the code a little bit. All right, now the properties that I'm going to put on here, the parameters that I'm going to pass in, first and foremost of the type. Now in the past we've done DB open dynaset, okay, but since this is a record set that we're not going to be entering any data into, we just need to read it. We don't need to change any information. We're not writing any information back to the table. We're just reading it one time, and that's all that we need. So we can use a special enum DB open snapshot, and then I'm also going to put in as part of my options DB read only. So this is going to be a read-only type of record set that is just a single snapshot of the data at that particular moment. Okay, it's not going to go back and double check the data that's in the table or anything. It's just going to one time drop the data that's in my table 1 employees and put it into the record set, and then it's done. And the record set is only going to be read-only. We're not going to make any changes to any data in the record set. This is very important to do whenever possible because it speeds up the processing of your data. Okay, it's just one of those things about the jet engine or ACE engine that you need to concern yourself with. Whenever possible, and you're only going to need to read information, do a DB open snapshot with a DB read only. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've filled in our record set. We're going to do a method on our record set, and the method is going to be find first. And you'll notice when I started typing in a find, you'll see that there are a lot of different finds. It's find first, find last, find next, find previous. But the one we're looking for is the first instance, the first record in our database, in our record set, that matches a certain criteria. And you'll notice that the criteria that we pass in here has to be a string. Okay, it has to be a type of string. So we're obviously going to need to put it in quotation marks. Okay, now the criteria that we're going to pass in, you have to think of it as asking the question where. okay, where something is something, okay? So where username equals whatever the user types in this text box, okay? That's essentially what we're thinking. We're looking for the record in our RS record set, or even more, to maybe make it a little bit clearer here, we're looking for our record in this table here where the username matches what the user typed here in the username text box. Okay? So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do the find first, and then we're going to pass in the first thing is going to be username. And that matches this field here in our table. So we're checking the username for a certain criteria. And that is where username is equal to, and here's a little bit of a tricky part here. I'm going to put an apostrophe here. And then I'm going to do a concatenation of me.txt username, and then wrap this concatenation with another apostrophe. Oops. Okay. So we've got username equal to, and wrapped in apostrophes, we've got whatever the user types is the in the text box for the username. And you can see down here, if the user types in sbishop, then what we would be passing in this particular string is username sbishop. And you can see sbishop gets wrapped up in these apostrophes. And this is very, very important. You need to understand that what we're doing is we're checking on our table here, we're looking at the username field, which is a type of text box. And remember, text in VBA is strings. Okay, they are strings. And because they are strings, you need to wrap your strings in quotation marks. And since we're already using quotation marks for this whole thing, we need to do something else. We need to use apostrophes instead to indicate that this is a string you should be comparing to the field that is called username. Okay? It may be a little throwing off at first and a little off-putting, but trust me, after you run into it enough times, you'll kind of understand, oh, you know what? I need to wrap that string here. I need to just wrap that value in apostrophes so that it knows that this is a string, a literal string. Okay, so when we use the find first, or really any of those other find methods, find last, find next, find previous, there is a property on the record set that gets set based upon whether or not a value was found or a record was found using that find first method. And that is the no match property. And no match will turn as either equal to true or false. Okay, those are the two values that no match is going to return. And because of that, we can utilize that in an if statement. So if rs no match, is equal to true, then we want to do something. Okay? So if there's no match found for what the user typed in for username, then what we want to go ahead and do is we want to set the label here on our form for incorrect username. We want to display that to the user. Okay, so we're going to do me.lbl wrong user, and we're going to set its visible property equal to true. So we're going to make that label visible. We're also going to do just a little matter of convenience here. I'm going to do me.txt username. I'm going to set its I'm going to use its set focus method in order to move the cursor to the text username text box. So if they put in a wrong username, it's going to move the cursor automatically back to that username text box. Okay? Then I'm also going to need to do something here that I haven't shown you yet, and that is use the exit keyword. We're going to exit the sub. Now when we use the exit keyword, you're going to follow it up with whatever it is that you are exiting. Okay? And when you use that exit, it's going to jump down to the end of whatever it is that you're exiting. So here we're doing our no match. We're going to change the label. You know, if no match is true, then we're going to make the label visible. We're going to move the cursor to that location, and then we're going to exit the subroutine, because whatever comes up down here okay, whatever code we do down here is completely unnecessary for the rest of the process. If there's no username that matches, then there's no point in checking the password, right? So by doing an exit sub, it will skip over this code and jump right down here to the end sub. Okay, so that's what the exit sub is doing in that particular location. Now let's do basically the same thing, but for the password instead. So we're going to do if. Now remember, when we did the find first, okay, we checked to see for a username. And the find first method on our record set will move the cursor in our record set. Oops. Hope if I hit the right button. It's going to move our pointer to that particular row, right? So if the user types in sbishop, it's going to move the cursor, the pointer, to this particular record. And from there, we can look at the password field and see what's in there and now compare it to what they typed in the password text box. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go back into our code here. And we're going to say if rs password is not equal to, okay, is not equal to me.txt password, then, and we're going to wrap our end if statement here, okay, then we're going to do basically the same thing if there was no match for the username. Okay, so that's kind of why I wrote the code to be if this isn't a match and this isn't a match, you're essentially going to be writing the same code. So me.lbl wrong pass, instead of wrong user, we're going to do wrong pass visible. Okay, because remember this one up here was for the user, this one here is for the password, and then me.txt password set focus, and then of course exit the sub, because we don't want to go any further. So these two if statements are basically identical, but they're doing it on two different text boxes, right? Okay. Now there is one other thing that you need to consider here just for a moment. Now that we've got this check in here to see our password, let's just contemplate a particular scenario here. Let's say that the user first puts in the wrong username. Okay, they do sbishop, they forget the B. Okay, this is going to return no match, which then makes the label visible and sets the focus. So it's going to make this now visible. Incorrect username is going to be visible. So they type the wrong one in, okay, and it goes back. Then they fix that, but they put the wrong password in. What's going to happen then to this incorrect username label when the user now has fixed the username but has the wrong password? What's going to happen to this label? Well, you haven't done anything to make it invisible again, right? So it's still going to show up as incorrect username, and the person could potentially get really perplexed by this. Well, I'm sure that's the right username. Well, it's because you as the coder didn't really think this one through. I've done this before. You need to make sure that you set the label of the wrong user visibility equal to false. Okay, you just need to, at some point, if it's successful, you need to force it and make sure, no matter what, under all circumstances, make that visibility false. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for our password. We're going to do me.lbl wrong pass visible equals false. Okay, so again, if no match happens, if no match for the username that they typed in matches, then it's going to set the visibility to true for that label, change the focus, and exit the subroutine. If it is successful, if there is a match and this returns false, that there's no match, then it's going to go ahead and jump down here to this code, which is going to ensure that the visibility of that wrong user label is set to false. So if the first time through it turns it to true, then the second time through, if they fix it, it's going to be false. Okay, and then the same thing for the password. But here we're going to check to see if the password does not match what's in what the user typed. Then we're going to go ahead and set the visibility to equal to true. That would probably help. And we're going to set the focus, of course, to that text, to this password. And then if it is successful, we don't want to show the label, and instead we want to go ahead and do a command of open form, and it's going to be form main. Okay, that's just the form I've designated. I created a little blank form here called form main, and that's going to be the form that opens if they successfully logged in. Now there's one other thing that you need to think about. Remember how we made this pop-up? Okay, we made it a pop-up that's going to stay on top. So we may open up a form underneath, but we need to do something with our pop-up, our modal window, and we need to go ahead and close it. So do command close, and I'm just going to kind of do a little cheat here. Form me.name. I could have typed in the full form name, you know, FRM login. That's certainly possible, but you know, I just as shorthand, I just do me.name. It does the same thing, okay? And that's going to basically complete our code for what we're looking to do. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's just test our form here. It pops open here. Oh, looks like I lost the name of my form here. Let me go back in here. I think it's after I did the save. I kind of goofed that up here. Yeah, form login. We don't want it to be form login. We want it to be login screen. Okay. Just fix that real quick. Okay, so let's take a look. So there's our login screen. Username, we're going to do sbishop. Password is PASSWRD. Click on login. And uh-oh, I made a boo-boo. Oh, that's because the form doesn't have anything on here. Hold on. I'm sorry, this is completely not part of what we were working on. There's a whole other bit of code that's on that form. Notice that I accidentally opened up form main. This is some code that's on there that's no longer usable here. So let's just do that, debug that. There we go. Okay. Probably would have been a good idea to debug the first time. Okay, let's try this again. So actually, let's go ahead and try sbishop. Okay, click on login. Incorrect username. Good. Okay, sbishop. Now let's try a wrong password. So we'll just type in garbledy-gook. Notice that we now get incorrect password. Put in the correct one. Click login, and bada bing, bada boom. We're in our application here. We're in our main menu. All right, so there you go. There's how you create a nice, easy, simple login form that you can reuse this form over and over and over again. Just change your code maybe, or change the, to open up a record set of the correct table. And in a little bit later here, we're going to actually talk about encryption, because sometimes you don't really want those passwords to be stored in your tables this clearly. If somebody gets a hold of this table, or somebody exports this table, they'll have an entire list of passwords and usernames to log into your database, and that's not good. So we will talk about how to encrypt those passwords a little bit later.